Good evening and welcome to Across the Pitch. We're the soccer show for people who think Leyton Orient is the name of a Chinese food restaurant.
Delicious.
Tasty. Snap. Nice one, Matt.
They aren't a Chinese food restaurant. In fact, they are a football club, but they are owned by the CEO of Dunkin' Donuts, Nigel Travis. Don't you think that sounds kind of like a British country singer? You know, my bulldog ran away and my wife took my motor car.
Is the nickname the Coppers? On tonight's show, we talk about a big old bowl of red jello. You'll hear about some teams you've probably never heard of, and we learn how a former Premier League manager has fallen on hard times. But first,
the title race is back on, and if you had a chance to see today, Manchester City took on Everton in a game that was rescheduled due to their commitment in the EFL Cup coming up against Chelsea. With the 2-0 win today, they did move ahead of Liverpool in the standings. Now, it should be mentioned that Liverpool and everybody in the league other than Everton now does have a game in hand on City. Matt, you watched that game today, didn't you?
I did. I was checking in on it while also watching some of the Bayern Hertha Berlin game, but I did watch a little bit of it, yes.
From what I see, it was a bit of a slog. There wasn't much flair to the game today.
There wasn't, man. It was a slow, probably cold North English night. You could sense that both teams were probably moving a little bit slower than they wanted to.
Were there any black cats on the field this time?
No, not this time. No black cats, though. Yeah.
That might have livened up the proceedings a little bit.
Right, well.
So cold up there that they're going to be peeling people's lips off the Blarney Stone.
That's in Ireland.
I was hoping to hear a rousing rendition of that viral video that's been going across Facebook. Have you guys seen that one?
What's that one?
The
Arran seeing Michael Bolton?
No, that hasn't happened yet.
No,
it's not going to happen either, Phil. Because I'm going to win that bet.
It's the U.S. Man City supporters, and they're singing like. Have you guys heard that song, like "Baby Shark"?
No, I haven't. Don't talk to me about it.
Man, so they're doing that, but they're throwing in City's players' names, and it's just horrific. I felt bad as an American. I had to text some of my buddies who live over in London, fellow Chelsea supporters, and just apologize on behalf of Americans everywhere for that. You know.
Embarrassed as an American soccer fan, that takes a lot.
Who was Daddy Shark? I want to know.
No, they just throw in so it'd be like Raheem Shark or Silva Shark.
Oh, God.
It's bad.
I'm cringing and I haven't even seen it. Oh.
I know we don't normally talk about the Spanish league, but what happened to that El Clasico?
Hey, before we get on to that, we've got to just talk a little bit more about that title race, I think, if that's okay. We can talk about that because that's interesting.
Before we talk about El Clasico, you were wanting to talk about El Tráfico.
El Tráfico.
LA Galaxy versus LAFC, El Tráfico.
Is that what they call it?
Yeah, that's really what they
call
it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
I think they voted on it. I think it was like a supporter vote. Crazy.
Yeah, it's because, you're stuck in traffic the whole way between the two stadiums.
They're only 5 minutes apart. We digress. I want to go back and have a chat. Yes, there it is. It's going to happen at least once an episode. And we could probably make a competition about that. I wanted to have a quick chat to you or continue talking about that title race because it's actually Liverpool and Man City are equal on points.
They are, yeah, 62.
But Man City has the goal difference. Yes, there's a goal differential. They've scored more goals than Liverpool has, and Liverpool's actually scored the least amount of goals across the league, so they've got a very tight defence. But the big bowl of jello, of course, is the Reds of Liverpool, and I'm sure Jurgen Klopp is probably going, oh, God, here we go again. Because it was back in the season of 2014 where they looked like they were going to win it, and all of a sudden, didn't they come crashing down a heap? You shared with us that wonderful footage of Steven Gerrard just making an absolute hash and passing the ball to, well, it was a Chelsea player. Who was the Chelsea player again?
Demba Ba.
And yeah, well, that was the end of that.
Yes, it was.
And that was the end of Liverpool that season.
We should do a bit on coaches named Jurgen.
I know one. Is he the same one you've got in mind?
I saw a stat today that said in the history of the Premier League, teams in first place at Christmas have gone on to win the title. And only 2 times has that team in first at Christmas not won the title. And both of those previous times, it was Liverpool that was in first, and they finished second.
Oh, boy.
How Spursy of them.
So
Well, speaking of Spurs, they're still very much in the race. I mean, the top 2 teams are fallible. Liverpool's wobbling a little bit. Man City don't look the confident team that they were last season, and they're not running away with the competition. And Tottenham probably coming off one of their toughest streaks of the season.
Well, if Man City didn't keep running into these killer matchups in the League Cup, we digress.
It's got me a little cheesed off, actually.
Cheesed off.
But yes, we digress.
More on that later.
More on that later. There you go. Yeah, Tottenham still in the title race. Outsiders, of course, I would suggest, wouldn't you guys?
I don't know, man. I'm not too convinced that they're a part of the title race. I'm looking at their record right there. They're 19 wins, 0 draws, and 6 losses. And I think to make up that 5 points.
They're the only team in the league that hasn't drawn this year, I think.
Yeah. And I think to make up those points, I mean, that's if you're just winning games or losing games.
That's less than 2 games, though.
Yeah, but those draws are kind of important just depending on who they're against. And so if they're not picking those points up, I'm not convinced, man. Harry Kane's still out.
Yes.
The Spurs, they've shown a lot of heart since the Harry Kane injury because they haven't played well, but they've managed to get the points out of the games. I mean, we talked about this a bit last week. They were trailing Fulham, ended up pulling that one out with literally 5 seconds left in the game, probably. Then last week, again, they made another last-second victory. So, I mean, this is a team where they've also had Son come back from the Asian Games. And like we had talked about, he really, over maybe the last 13, 15 weeks or so, in my opinion, may be the best player in the Premier League. I mean, if you just look at some of the goals that he's scored, I mean, this is a guy who isn't standing in front of the net and heading him in. This is a guy that's taking sometimes the ball on his side of midfield and taking it the whole way down and scoring with it.
Right. One of the goals of the season was from him. Certainly in attacking quality. Is this just one of those things that happens in the season? You go on a bit of a tear and then all of a sudden lose it again? Or is he going to do Mohamed Salah and perhaps have a wonderful season like last season?
Yeah, I think Son's going to continue just to perform well. I mean, I think it's a bit of a blow for him and South Korea, obviously being knocked out so early in the Asia Cup, but it was a blessing for Tottenham.
Yeah.
I think he'll continue to play well. I'm really surprised that, you haven't really heard him linked with a move away from Tottenham.
No.
Some of these larger European teams coming in after him. The Barcelonas or the Real Madrids or
even the Manchester Uniteds.
The unusual commitments to the South Korean national team where he does get pulled away at unusual times may be something that scares off some of the bigger clubs.
I hadn't really thought too much into it, but that could be a big thing, right?
Well, I mean, you've got that with the African players as well.
How many times do we see players where the U.S. national team has a game and Pulisic and McKinney, they say, we can't be there, we're playing with our club. With South Korea, Son can't say no. He has to go play for his country when they call for it.
Yeah, I think that's part of the agreement set up with the region so that they have a release clause in their contracts. It's certainly been an issue for Australian players over the years where the clubs wouldn't release them, and then that over in recent years. Mind you, we were playing in Oceania at the time, so why would you send them off to some crappy little island just to have their legs kicked out from underneath them? I don't know. But certainly the Asia League has a lot more pull, but so does the African League of Nations as well. So they have to release their players too.
Yeah,
there's a lot of players that happens to. It's not just the Asian players, and he's certainly not alone there, is what I'm saying.
I think if you look at some of those larger European teams, though, bringing in a guy like Son, knowing that, okay, he might be gone for a month or a month and a half
or a game.
in the middle of the season. or a game, depending on how poorly they do. Bigger European clubs are obviously going to have people that can just come in for 1 or 2 games and provide something.
Right.
Tottenham just don't really have that.
And it's not going to be a surprise on the fixtures either. You know it's coming up, and you know
True.
they're probably going to get called up. Yes, you're right, Matt. Spurs doesn't really have that depth in the lineup, but they would have been prepared for it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have been prepared for Harry Kane's injury.
No,
that's a big one. That's a blow, and I think he's out till March.
And Dele Ali as well.
Yeah, he's
True. Yeah. Yep, we'll forget about him. Oh, well, too bad.
yeah.
So, no title for Spurs again.
I guess that's what I'm getting at. Is they've managed, even with their lack of depth and even with these injuries and Son having to go to the Asian games, they've persevered and they've found a way to get the 3 points out of these games.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, they fought.
Credit where credit is due. None of us like the Spurs here, but, credit where credit is due.
Fair enough. Well done. Moving on. What? I think we've said enough about Tottenham.
We want to talk about the FA Cup next, aren't we?
Some fantastic results. We mentioned a couple last week, or a couple of games to watch last week, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
And how did they go?
Who was it that said Newport County was?
I believe that might have been you, Phil. And yes, they looked thoroughly convincing over Championship side Middlesbrough, beating them 2-0. I mean, I don't think anyone predicted that.
No.
Newport County, tell us about that.
And they got a tough one, though, coming up.
Yeah, they did.
They knocked off Leicester in the third round. The funny thing is, these guys, they're a League Two team, and by no means are they tearing up League Two. They're 14th in League Two, minus 10 goal differential, and now they've come into the FA Cup. They've knocked off a Premier League team. They've knocked off upper table championship team, but now, yes, they have Manchester City coming into their house, which will be interesting to see how many Manchester City players would step onto that pasture that you called it, Arran.
The paddock, yes, the paddock. I couldn't imagine too many Man City players, all fans, wanting to make the trek down there to Wales to see. Oh, it was just a sodden pitch. It was muddy. It looked awful. But, I don't know. Maybe the home ground advantage, at the very least, they're going to get a nice payday off of playing Manchester City.
Yeah.
And they've already earned something.
You did mention one interesting thing there is that Newport County is in Wales, and this is kind of in the way that Major League Baseball has the Toronto Blue Jays or the NBA has the Toronto Raptors. There are a couple of teams in the English League, most notably Cardiff City in the Premier League this year, and Newport County, which actually isn't too far up the map from Cardiff. You've also got Swansea.
Yeah, Premier League team now in the Championship.
There are a few Welsh teams in the English League scattered about. Make sure you have all your passports.
I think this is actually an interesting game to watch. I don't think City is going to be putting a lot of emphasis on winning the FA Cup this year.
You don't think so?
I think we all know City is Champions League or bust.
Right.
I think that the owners have made that very clear by what they've been doing by bringing in Pep, giving him whatever his heart desires as far as players go. And so I'd be interesting to see how the team that City lines up with against Newport.
Yeah.
I mean, they're coming off. So they got Chelsea this coming Sunday on the 10th. Then they go to Newport on the 16th. And then on the 20th of February, they're going to Schalke in the Champions League.
Right.
And then 4 days after that, they're playing Chelsea at Wembley in the EFL Cup final. So, I mean, they've got a run of fixtures here.
It's a stacked schedule there, isn't it? Yeah.
The other thing is that paddock that we've been talking about. I don't think you're going to see Kevin De Bruyne with his knee issues. You're not going to see Aguero. He's a bit of a prima donna. He's not going to play there. What City players do you think will be out there? You'll probably see a guy like Kyle Walker.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't even know if you'd see Kyle Walker. I would think that Otamendi probably starts. I would guess Claudio Bravo in the goal. Benjamin Mendy had that knee injury last year, so playing on a field that's that hard, he might not even play. So maybe Danilo, John Stones, maybe. I think you're going to see maybe a lot of younger City players. I think you're going to see some academy players coming.
Yes, I think so. And
filling in those spots. And if that happens, I think you show a team like Newport, hey, we're here for the taking. And if they come out and play like they've played against Leicester and Middlesbrough, they might be able to catch City sleeping.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a team.
I don't think it's going to be a 9-0 like we had against Borough.
No, I don't think
not at
so.
all. I mean, this is a City team that has lost this year to Newcastle 2-1. They've lost 4 games this year, which I think total last year they lost 2.
They lost to Crystal Palace at home.
Right.
They lost to Crystal Palace. So we all kind of bulked at it like, oh, City's getting this easy draw again. But I don't know, man. Newport's got to be riding high right now.
I think they are. And you know what? If they do trot out a second string side, which they're right to do so because they're aiming for bigger and better glory, I guess you could say, Newport is probably going to be stirred up a little bit like that. Hey, you're not taking us seriously, and we're here to play.
Right.
So they're going to have a bit of fire in their bellies, as our mate from Accrington Stanley would say. I think it's going to be a great matchup, actually. Keep an eye on it. It's the 5th round in the FA Cup, and that game is happening Saturday, 16th February. It's at 10:30, you said, Matt, because I'm looking on the BBC website, so that's Greenwich time there.
Yeah, I got it at 10:30.
Speaking of riding high, Newport is into a bit of a money field here after their win against Middlesbrough. As with the FA Cup, there's a new rule this year. The team that progresses the furthest from each league gets a £250,000 bonus, and by progressing through this round, Newport County is now the furthest League 2 team. They take that £250,000 bonus home. In terms of other matchups that we may want to take a look at this weekend, you have 2 League 1 teams remaining. Those would be Doncaster and Swansea City. And how this works is with these 2 League 1 teams left, if one of them were to advance and the other one were to lose, the team advancing would secure the £250,000. If they were to both lose, then they would actually split that and get $125,000 each. What do you guys think about those matchups? Which of those 2 teams do you think has a better chance of advancing?
I actually think out of Wimbledon versus Millwall and Doncaster taking on Crystal Palace, both of those League 1 teams are playing at home. I think Wimbledon probably has the better shot.
They looked very good the other day when I was watching that game. They looked excellent, actually.
Yeah.
They could do really well. I think so. There used to be a little bit of animosity between Millwall and the old Wimbledon, which is now, they've relocated up to Milton Keynes. This is not the same club. I don't know whether the same animosity is going to be there, but Wimbledon itself, AFC Wimbledon, I should say, is a fantastic story because they're a fan-based club. They were started by the fans in Wimbledon after the relocation. They started off in the 9th tier in English football and they made their way all the way up into League 2.
League 1. They're in League 1 this year.
League 1. Beg your pardon. League 1. What am I talking about? They're actually ahead of the old Wimbledon team, MK Dons. They hold the record for the most consecutive wins in English football, these guys. And it's incredible. This has come from a fan-owned team, basically, and they've made it all the way up there into League 1. And now they're in the FA Cup with Millwall. It's great. I love it. And I hope to see them win. I really do.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go in the other direction, and I think Doncaster is the team that I like. I understand that Crystal Palace is a Premier League team versus Millwall being a lower-end championship team. I kind of think that in some ways works in the favor of Doncaster because I don't think that the game means as much to Crystal Palace as it does to Millwall. Millwall's probably going to bring out their first-string lineup. Crystal Palace may not play a Zaha, for instance. The other thing is if you look at the League 1 table, you have to look all the way to the very bottom to find AFC Wimbledon. They're almost certainly going to get relegated. They're on 23 points and dead last. They're a full 8 points back of Shrewsbury in 23rd, so it's fairly certain that this is a team headed for League Two. Meanwhile, Doncaster is up in 7th place, plus 14 goal differential. I think that they're likely to get into the League One playoffs and could even maybe get through and possibly be a championship team next year. So I'm going to take Doncaster over Crystal Palace as my upset of the week.
It'll be an interesting match to watch out for. And of course, there is the big match there on Monday, the 18th of February, Chelsea versus Manchester United. And I kind of feel sorry for Manchester United here. Now, you talk about Man City having an easy run in the FA Cup. How difficult a run has Man United had? Because they've not had easy games to play. My heart bleeds for them. It absolutely does, guys. You have to believe me when I say it. It doesn't. I don't really care for them. But Chelsea versus Manchester United, that's a big match. These are probably two clubs that want to win this. Am I right?
Speaking as a Chelsea supporter, I love the FA Cup. Chelsea fans historically love the FA Cup because for a lot of years, that's kind of where we were competitive back in the 80s and the 90s. And I love it. I think we're gunning to win it this year. Hold on to the cup from last year. This is a replay of last year's final.
It is.
And we're at home where we've been stronger this season. You know, with the addition of Higuain, we have a goal scorer up top. United's had a good run, but I think Chelsea's going to take this. I would say 2-1 Chelsea.
Ooh, big call. I like it, though. I like the call. Higuain coming into the club, he's made a change. He's just brought balance to Chelsea, and that was quite evident, admittedly, against Huddersfield, but it was a solid victory, and Huddersfield never looked in it. That was a good win that you guys needed to have last week.
Yeah, it was. It was big.
In the FA Cup, we were talking about, for instance, that Wimbledon looks like that they're going to get relegated down to League Two. They're at the bottom of League One with minus 24 goal differential, 23 points, 8 points behind Shrewsbury in 23rd. They're 9 points behind Bradford in 22nd. So they're on their way down. But more importantly, by getting relegated from League One, we're talking about Wimbledon going down to League Two, which is still the football league. One thing that we haven't really talked about a whole lot on the show that we're going to take kind of a deep dive into tonight is teams actually getting relegated out of League Two into the 5th division and vice versa, teams getting promoted from the 5th division into League Two and actually teams coming and going from the football league. And one thing that makes this particularly interesting is right now at the bottom of the League Two table, we have Notts County sitting in 24th. They're 5 points behind Macclesfield Town in 23rd. 7 points behind Morecambe in 22nd, minus 30 goal differential. So, to say the least, things are not looking good for Notts County.
No, not at all. See what I did there?
One of the original teams from the 1888 Football League. The first season of official English football was 1888. There was 12 teams in the first division that year, Notts County being one of them. And if Notts County were to get relegated this year, this would be the first time since 1888 that they've been out of the league. So this is big news. Big news.
That's incredible. What's that? I can't do the math in my head, but what's that?
131, I believe.
That's amazing. And yeah, they're one of the founding teams of English football. We're not talking the Premier League here, although they were they?
Well, it was at that time, it would have been the equivalent to the Premier League because it was the first division, and the first division, as it was founded in 1888, was the top division all the way through 1991 when it broke off and became the Premier League. Now, interestingly enough, out of those 12 teams, Preston North End won that first ever league championship. The other teams, Aston Villa, they're in the championship right now. Wolverhampton Wanderers, they're of course in the Premier League. Blackburn Rovers, they've won the Premier League before. Bolton Wanderers, they're still around. West Bromwich Albion, they're in the championship. Everton, Burnley, those are of course Premier League teams. Our favorite Derby County, Notts County, who we just spoke of. Arran's favorite, Stoke. 11 of those 12 teams are actually still around. The 12th team, interestingly enough, was actually Accrington. Now, this was not Accrington Stanley.
No,
This was Accrington FC.
correct.
This Accrington FC folded in 1891 and then became the original Accrington Stanley. They, however, folded in 1961, and the current version of Accrington Stanley was refounded in 1966. So the Accrington is the only of the 12 teams from the original 12 that's not still up today, 131 years later. And these teams are in the same cities, same name. That tells you what kind of commitment these people have to their football franchises.
Yeah, absolutely. 1888, 89. Yeah. They were still wearing knickerbockers back in those days, and I don't think they had a ball. They just kicked around the can, didn't they?
Matt, there was another thing about Notts County. I know you were telling us some of the history on Juventus and how they took their colors from Notts County, actually.
Right. Juventus, right, the famous football club from Italy that has currently been tearing up Serie A, which is the first division there in Italy for the past, 8 years now.
Yeah, because they've got no competition.
Yeah, they have no competition. Originally, they would play in pink shirts with a black tie.
Yeah. It was the style of the time.
Well, and what's kind of interesting is traditionally their away shirts have been pink. So they've still kind of held on to that, which is kind of cool. They'd wear pink shirts with a black tie, and that only happened because they had the wrong shirt sent to them. And so one of the players made the earlier shirts and it would fade. So they were looking for a replacement anyway.
Watched it with the Reds, didn't he?
Yeah, right. So they were looking for some replacement shirts. And at the time, they had an English gentleman on their team who was asked if he had any contacts in England who could give them some new shirts that wouldn't fade. They would hold up for a longer time, withstand the elements. And so he had a friend in Nottingham who was a Notts County supporter, and he called him up, I guess, or wrote him a letter or however they did it back then, and asked him, hey, if you got any shirts, please send them to us. And so he sent him a crate of black and white striped Notts County shirts to Turin, and they've been rocking the black and white stripes since then.
The Englishman, by the way, was the fabulously named John Savage.
In 2011, Juventus actually invited Notts County over to Turin, and they played an exhibition match against each other.
I remember that, yeah.
I'm sure it was a close game.
Oh, that was nice of them, wasn't it?
1-1 draw, actually. And the problem is after the players are leaving the field, police arrested them while they thought there was a jailbreak.
Bumpies. Very good. How did Newcastle get their stripes then? Newcastle United.
What's interesting, too, is Newcastle is also called the Magpies, and so is Notts.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting. I was making a joke about them wearing knickerbockers. I'm looking at the original Newcastle team when they were known as Stanley FC. Funny enough, they wore navy blue jerseys and white knickerbockers. There you go. Yeah, I was actually telling the truth. I wasn't making a joke, so yeah.
Do you know that New York Knicks is short for New York Knickerbockers?
Yes, I did.
There we go.
So I'm assuming that they wore knickerbockers. That must have been quite an exceptional time for men's fashion.
We were talking about how Notts County looks like they're headed out of the league. There appears to be, if we look at the English National League, which is the 5th division, the highest division of non-league, has a couple of interesting stories. In the opening of the show, we mentioned Leyton Orient. They're a team that's actually made it as high as the 1st division.
Yeah.
Back in the 1960s, they have a history that dates back to the 1800s and actually take their name Orient from from a trading company that one of their players played for back in the day. Right now, they're in first in the National League. They have a good chance of getting promoted back to League Two. They were actually relegated out of League Two 2 years ago. But perhaps the more interesting story is the team that's in third, Salford City.
Yes.
A team that has made it all the way up from the 8th division. Just 4 years ago, they were in the 8th division, and they have a few owners that you may have heard of.
Yes, Salford is, for those of you who don't know, it's on the west side of Manchester City, the other side of the canal, and it is owned by some former Manchester United players, none other than Paul Scholes, Ryan Giggs. I believe there's probably some Beckham interest in there too recently, but it was that fabulous class of...
The Nevilles.
Oh, Phil, yes, can't forget Phil.
Both of the Nevilles.
Yes.
And then, yes, David Beckham. Then there's also investor Peter Lim,
Right.
Singaporean billionaire, owns 40% of the team, and then now each of the 6 former Manchester players own 10% of the team each. And so they've taken over this team, and there was actually a series, and it's actually a very short series. It's run for a total of 3 seasons. The first 2 are on Netflix. If you have a chance to check them out, just 2 seasons, 2 episodes each. This shows where they started from when they took over the team. Now they're on the verge of making it into league.
You know, good for them. I mean, it's not unusual to have a consortium come in and buy a club and build it up. I'm going to dislike this team from the get-go because of the ownership consortium there. Never a fan of Class 96.
92.
Because that's so good. Was it 92? Oh, goodness.
That's the name of the show on Netflix, is Class of 92.
Oh, right.
And the reason I'm cheesed off this week is because there's a 3rd season that was available and it's not on Netflix, and apparently it was only on the BBC. And, somebody in England send me season 3, please, because I'm cheesed off because I want to watch it.
And Netflix, give us a call. We're doing a lot of plugging for their shows recently.
Then there was also an interesting conspiracy theory with Jose Mourinho involved, actually, where apparently Peter Lim, who was the billionaire investor in Salford City, apparently has his eyes on purchasing Manchester United, and Jose Mourinho actually came out and publicly said that he thought that this Peter Lim was starting a conspiracy against him in the media, as he wanted him out before he bought the team.
Oh, interesting.
Should we have a little check-in on our favourite manager? He's had a bit of a crap old week, hasn't he? Our most favourite ex-Premier League manager, Jose Mourinho. He's had a bit of a shocker of a week, really. He went slipping and sliding across some ice rink in Russia. I think all of Russia's an ice rink right now, but this one in particular actually had hockey players on it.
Pavel Datsyuk, one of the best players of the world.
He's obviously requiring a bit of money if he's having this sort of appearance thing. He's doing a bit of a Pele thing, really, isn't he? He's like, hey, give me cash. Great, fine. I'm going to slip over. And it's actually it's quite funny. In that Schadenfreude way, you're like, oh, dear, what a fall.
I don't think you get paid for those. Now, this was in Russia, so that might be a different story, but I'm pretty sure that those people singing the national anthem or throwing out the first pitch of the U.S., that's all volunteer.
I think with Jose, man, it's just he doesn't know what to do. Pep took a year off and he was out just relaxing and kind of staying out of the limelight. I think Jose just doesn't know how to do that.
I'm going to go walk across the ice and fall on my ass today.
Or he's doing punditry work, or he's running his mouth about something. It's crazy, man.
Whittling up a couple of sticks so he can plot his revenge. But yeah, anyway, Jose Mourinho, good to hear from you again, mate. We should make this a regular thing. What's Jose doing this week?
Jose what?
The week in Jose. You wanted to have a bit of a chat about a couple of other teams, didn't you? The oldest teams, well, in English football.
We talked about the beginning of the league in 1888 and those teams, but there are some teams that actually have existed longer than that before the leagues were official. And Notts County, who we mentioned earlier, their history actually goes back 157 years, all the way back to 1862. However, the oldest team. They make this very well known on their website, which I believe they built a year after they formed the team.
Sorry.
That would be Sheffield FC, all the way back in 1857. This team is 162 years old.
Ooh, grand old veteran.
They currently play in the 8th division
Wow.
of English football, and this is non-league. I mean, these are semi-pro players. These are guys
This is why they can't update their website.
guys that fix your refrigerator in the daytime and then go play football at night. I mean, this is as you get into some of these lower leagues, you run into some teams that have some interesting names.
I can't wait to hear you pronounce this.
Just going through and seeing some of the teams that Sheffield FC would play, other than their yearly friendly against Sheffield United, which they lost 11-0 last year. They will be beating teams like, for instance, Loughborough Dynamo.
Loughborough.
Loughborough.
Yes, Loughborough.
Loughborough Dynamo. You may think that this sounds like a Russian team, and you're correct, because the story is that Loughborough was formed in the 1950s after Moscow Dynamo visited England and played a friendly against the Wolverhampton Wanderers. Evidently, there was some school kids from Loughborough that liked the name and formed the team back in 1955, and they've been kicking along ever since. There's also an FC Romania.
That's interesting, that one. That's really interesting.
Evidently, this particular team, FC Romania, they play in Cheshunt, England.
You're good as a guess as mine.
They were formed by some Romanian immigrants. If you look at the history of these teams, there's so many stories, and that's what makes all of this so interesting. And, you know, every team has a story behind it. And we had talked about Salford City. If you watch that documentary, there's a lady that serves the hamburgers and the pies in the concession stand that's been doing it for 28 years on a volunteer basis. And the guys that paint the lines on the field or fix the cracks in the stadium, these are all people who show up and volunteer their time just to keep these football clubs running. You have things like the manager is late because he got stuck at work and has all the footballs in his van and practice can't start on time. And
it is fascinating, Phil. These teams aren't manufactured teams. In the case of West Ham, a group of iron workers, and they got together, knocked around and had a bit of a league together with competing teams in the region, you know. These teams with storied histories with long heritages and a lot of characters and a lot of incidents across the time. It's not like you're just going to say, well, it has happened, but you're not going to say, right, we're going to start a league right here and now, or we're going to start a team in this town, because they've probably got one to start with. I don't see it being well received, and I can see parallels to that with Red Bull Leipzig, which we mentioned last week, manufactured, but they're kind of loathed as well by the rest of the German league. Interesting. We do have the poll, Phil and Matt, that we did on Facebook.
Yes, that's right.
Which player has the greatest career in their respective sport? Curiously, I don't know whether I agree with the way the poll's coming out, even though it pains me to say it, but the two players were Tom Brady, of course, for the Patriots. So congratulations, Tom. And the Patriots for the Super Bowl win. And Lionel Messi. And, well, obviously we're a soccer show, so Lionel Messi is 63% of the votes over old mate Tom. That's interesting and good for you. I tend to disagree, but I voted with my head, not my heart there.
Here's what I look at with Tom Brady, and he is probably the greatest player to ever play in any sport, because in a team game, it literally does not matter who you put around this guy. This guy won his first Super Bowl in 2001. He's now won his sixth Super Bowl 19 years later. Every other player on the roster has turned over, and he's won 4 other Super Bowls in between. And this is a guy that wins a division every year, at least gets to the conference championship game. He's been to 8 conference championship games in a row, 3 Super Bowls in a row, and he is the only one, other than the coach, obviously, he is the only one that remains consistently on the team. And there's nobody else that you can say that about. Michael Jordan, he had to have Scottie Pippen. Wayne Gretzky, he had to have Mark Messier. If you look at somebody like Lionel Messi, what has he done for Argentina in international play? He needs to have somebody around him
to get the results.
Yeah, I mean, can you guys name for me another player in another sport who has been able to win championships regardless of who the other players on his team were?
Matt? You raise a good point, and I don't think I've thought about it that way in terms of individual brilliance. But you're right, there has been that supporting cast around, and you have a look at Barcelona right now. I mean, they're just incredible. They're such a strong side. You're right, Argentina, he's carrying the weight of a nation on his shoulders there. You know, that counts for something, but, you know, he doesn't have the quality of players that they have in the lineup there at Barcelona. So, yeah.
I think it's hard to even have this discussion because you're talking about, I mean, it's different sports, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you look at Messi and the time he's been there and the trophies he won. Barcelona's seen some good turnover. Now, he's had some of the same guys around like Piqué and Busquets.
Mm-hmm.
But it's tough, man. I mean, 2 great athletes that will go down as probably the GOATs in each of their respective sports for sure.
Yep, I'd agree.
What I was getting to is less about the turnover and more about, regardless of who's on his team, Brady is there every year no matter what. I can't think of anybody else besides Tom Brady that consistently brings home a trophy without having that second banana.
Matt's right, too, of course. You know, it is a different game. Gents, I have some news across the desk pitch. No, wait. I have some news across the pitch desk, the news desk. The Everton Cat has been signed up. They've now signed up Raheem Sterling for a record feline transfer fee of 3 catnips.
Wow.
I'm not feline, okay, and now that I've mentioned it, I think that might be the end of the show, right, Meow?
It's been a good one. We've certainly had our history lesson for the day.
Yes, we have. We've had a lot to discuss, a lot to digest, and I can't wait till the next one.
Matt, closing messages?
I'm excited for this weekend. I think there's a lot of good stuff going on. And of course, we have our hometown Phoenix Rising opening up their home preseason tomorrow night. So I'm looking forward to that. And I know next pod, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Phoenix Rising.
Absolutely. I can't wait for that game tomorrow. And I will be out there, and I know you will too, Matt. And we're looking forward to the start of the USL and MLS seasons coming up on this side of the pond. And we're going to do an in-depth episode on our Phoenix Rising here coming up within the next couple of weeks. Acquaint you with all the new players that are coming to the defending USL Western Conference champions. As always, we thank you for joining us, and we will be back with you next week. And thank you all for joining me this week. And with my brother from down under, Aaron Ayers.
My mate from State 48.
Mr. Wizard, Matt Robards, bringing us all the names of all of the players from across the globe. Thank you all.